G'day friends and fans, welcome to Dave Talks Off. The Great Marriage Resignation Part 2. I think it's only going to be 2 parts. We'll see at the end. I think I can cover everything that I haven't already. But the internet ruined everything. No, I'm not anti-capitalist. Just hear me out, please. The internet gave us the ability to share ideas. In an instant, we can communicate across the world. We can reach new audiences. It's been a boom for some. Online dating, online shopping, online media. It's come at a cost, though. Like all competitions, instead of having many local competitions, you now have one global competition. So instead of having a winner and loser in every country, you now have a few winners and a lot more losers. Because countries now become losers. As people don't want to fix their shithole, they could just go to a better place. So they ruin it and move on. The locust effect, which is what happened to Egypt originally. Long before Rome, Egypt was destroyed by migrating locusts of humans, preying on civilizations and moving on. It's called this. What do you think? The Vikings were the first? No. Vikings started long before the age. The age of Viking is a lot older and more complex than anybody imagines. And they were a powerful force to be reckoned with on a global scale. But they weren't the only ones who took to raiding by the sea. They inspired others. Now, back to feminism. Like all ideas, the internet has allowed both good and bad ideas to spread. Feminism has been able to use, feminists, aka well-polished pit bulls, have been able to preach their brand of authoritarianism to a global audience. Like all prophets offering salvation, like all false prophets offering salvation, they are a cult of personality where their members feed them never-ending amounts of money, and of course salvation comes at the expense of others. That includes you, feminists, which is just... yeah, you don't understand. There's always going to be a hierarchy, and you're just fighting to be second place. Now, the members of the cult, of course, have become more and more radical, more and more materialistic, more and more narcissistic, and more predatory for the few valuable men. Some, like Elon, have leveraged their advantage. Some actually are losers in this, in which slowly and surely, as men die, their wealth has been transferred to women, who now use that wealth, Bill Gates, to Jeff Bezos, to transfer from a small global audience to being able to fund a large global audience, J.K. Rowling. Now, as the audience gets more and more radical, men are taking sides. Well, some, however, have decided, no, I'm walking away. And now, as feminism has become more and more obvious, as a global backlash to global feminism, communism, fascism, Islamofascism, and every other ism that is against us men. For make no mistake, every man in every country is the enemy, and every woman in every feminist movement globally wants to be the next Emperor Dowager. Particularly, I fear, Xi Jinping's wife, who does yield a lot of power openly now in the Communist Party. How much of Xi's trouble is because the rise of power of women, and now he doesn't know how to take it back? Yes. Now, before I continue, I'd like to remind you, the viewing audience, that this channel is sponsored by you, Empire of Elves. That's one word, empireofelves.myshopify.com. It's your one-stop shop for fantasy-themed artifacts based loosely on my writing, of course, but nevertheless, the Empire of Elves is where science and technology meet fantasy, hope, and wonder. These artifacts will touch your heart and ignite your imagination. There's the central character, the Emperor of all, Emperor Cade Hashimoto. So it's good to be the king, you know. Now, feminism can be likened to big box retail, a business model that has been highly successful. Strip away the bells, the whistles, most customer service, funnel people through an ever decreasing amount of checkouts into lines, frustrate them, anger them, but ultimately manipulate them. You anger them, then you give them a coupon, a discount, open a lane for them. The manager sits there, watches, scans, and soon it's going to be an AI. And of course, to get the Fast and Furious out quickly, the do-it-yourself checkout. We have traded on-demand quality goods that used to have long, durable lifespans. We have traded all that for cheap, disposable, single-use consumer items. Who did this? Women. Because they're so easy to manipulate. Would you like a washer at 70% off? Or the high-quality washer at $19.99. So they go buy the 70% off one. Soon, the expensive brands start to shrink. They become more desperate. They find that they can no longer pay you, the working man, so they go to China. But then inflation puts that washing machine at $7.99. So the big brands can sort of hover. They can charge a little bit more and sell you a slightly more durable item, but nevertheless something that will only last 5 years against the cheap crap that often only lasts a year. Now, we all at some point are guilty of buying a discounted item from a discounter, and we did not look and watch or pay attention as factories closed. But women did. They started taking over the colleges, the managerial jobs. They started embracing this collapse, preaching communism. The system has failed us, everyone. And of course, with more and more working men out of work, more and more single women in the system for predatory pit bulls, feminists, to prey on. Allegedly. Some, not all. Let's face facts. Mass consumerism and feminism go hand in hand. Women love to shop. Having cheap, disposable clothes keeps you hunting for bargains. Every time you go to the supermarket, things move. Women, it allows them to gather resources. So for a while, the hunter-gatherer was satisfied. But what they don't teach you in social economics or anthropology or whatever you want to call it, humanities subjects, they don't teach you about the predatory hunter or the predatory gatherer. They just teach you about the hunter-gatherer and the survival instinct, but never about the middleman, the parasite who benefits from the doctors, the lawyers, all the service industries as consumer goods, etc., long durable assets which they crave become luxury brands at a premium. And this premium price comes at your expense because they inflate the price of everything. So you have a shift from ownership-based economies to subscription models, where you're constantly buying the same products over and over again. You're paying to be in exclusive clubs to get discounts. You're paying I'm trying to remember what it's called when basically it's the just-in-time model. Everything comes in cycles just in time. So just in time for your next purchase comes a new, bigger, more expensive model. So you don't taste the inflationary bite. But since Obama, wages were frozen. They were not keeping up with inflation. Pay rises were few and rare and usually only for government workers. Now, the automotive industry and home improvement sectors faced systemic crisis for years, as fewer individuals were able to invest in. So what happens is companies are now owned by asset management. As shares, for now, shares are still bought and sold on large quantities. How long is that going to last before asset managers start shifting from a fluctuating business model to a steady income business model where instead of competing various companies against each other, they pick the winner and invest all into the winner in every sector. And soon, private property will all be owned by asset managers, your union pension funds being the primary source of that money, and the primary unions being state-backed. They will, of course, state-backed, state employees, so they're state-backed, so they will worship the state, want the state to own more, and eventually the union, aka North Korea, China, is the ultimate winner. That is how they planned this economy for the last 350 years since they sat down and said, we're running out of land. The population of England is growing faster than we can keep up with the production of timber and wheat. So they they tried jailing people, trying to create a perfect society, trying to slow down the growth. It didn't work, so they started exporting people, and now that business model is the third world. Now, feminists, we skip a lot of other stories, I know, but they are stories for other days. They are too long and and I don't want to break this into three parts. So, the long and short of it is, feminism did not start when we were told. It started with the Romantic Age. It started with women creating fantasy ideas of women in power who delivered utopia. But it's been long around. There are no real matriarchies. We keep getting told about them. You ask them, ask a feminist to name one. Okay, they were small, isolated societies, by the way. And yes, they challenged the power of Rome. Why did Rome wage war on them? Because Rome was going to war against war. If you didn't join the Roman Empire, they went to war against you. And eventually it got too big to manage, so they stopped expanding. But that's how they took over, right? They initially got people to join their empire. The British tried that too and were successful at it, just not for as long as Rome. But Rome went to war against those who waged war against Rome. Women, traditionally, for the last 3.5 to maybe the 6,500 years, have waged more wars than men. Fact. Can't dispute it. Even in European history, if you isolate it. From 1958, you go back 1,600 years. The longest period of war in Europe is only the 112-year war, the 100-year war. That lasted 112, well, 117.5 years, but 112 if you take the fact that the peace talk or negotiations at the end did actually stop the war. I think it's 112 continuous warfare and then fragmented wars until the final withdrawal of the Normans from France. They played themselves, but 1,600 years since the Dragon Emperor decided to unite the kingdoms through to communist uniting more kingdoms. Liberty and justice for all, everybody, at the point of a bayonet, at the cost of your sanity. Yes, feminism, communism are materialistic. It is based on greed and envy, the ultimate gathering of all resources into the hands of the few, and then have the matriarch sit around in their little sewing circle deciding how everything is dished out. Because it's equity and equality, everybody. Which means if someone earns more, they take. If someone earns less, they give. Because those humble matriarchs need to be well fed and well taken care of. Yeah, the hierarchy. You've been deceived to think that men were the oppressors. It was not. It's always been mankind oppressing mankind to not, and then the rich having to defend their wealth from other predators. The castle on the hill, pay the high tax or be prey to the roving bandits. See, you weren't taught history. You're propagandized since you're able to look up and you hear about Robin the Hood, the Black Knight, Frankenstein's monster. Many other stories were all changed over time to instead of being cautionary tales against the abuse of power. Oh, Frankenstein has not been edited. It was deliberately designed as, it's just the way they interpret it, as man being inhuman to man, rather than Dr. Frankenstein representing all of humanity. So Mary Shelley did not, I'm not accusing Mary Shelley of anything other than creating a horror story about a scientist, a rogue, who creates life, and how the village, not the men, the village were the real monsters. Their reaction to Frankenstein's monster. Frankenstein's monster wasn't a monster. See, most people only know what they see and hear on the idiot box, known as the television. It's called programming, not programmed entertainment. Or scheduled entertainment, I should say. The whole Rebel Alliance, communist propaganda, Star Wars, Star Trek were both called space communism in the early days. They weren't as popular as you think. I know, I was there. I had an X-Wing. I got beaten up for being a nerd for liking Star Wars. Star Wars did not become popular until the hype train of The Empire Strikes Back. It was advertised for over 2 years before it came out. Star Wars was the biggest science fiction film, but not the biggest film. Other films surpassed it very quickly and very soon. In fact, the biggest film was a romance based on the Titanic. And since then, that has been surpassed. But because the media want to program you, they got to keep you in the approved lanes. And Star Wars was one of those approved lanes, to make sure that others could not grow in the global competition. See, stories are bought and sold, and they are very valuable, but they make sure that the authors in their lifetime are not valuable and do not. You think George Lucas, 5 billion? Really? You know how much he really got? The rest are shares, and those lost value. And at the expense of the projects. Yeah. Plus his own ego. Had him crawling back to the company he sold. No one will ever know the truth. We don't know how much he lost. No one will know, but he spent a year having basically a huge freak out, complaining that he got gypped, he got fooled, he got fine printed by the white slavers who turned his baby into their slave. Oh. Who knew? I thought we all knew Bob Iger was the devil. Everybody knew what happened at Marvel. Everybody on the inside of the industry said it was the worst deal ever for Marvel. The Marvel gave up its independence. But that's what they do. They find an inside man, Feige, who wants to crawl his way to the top and is willing to sell his soul to do it. And then even before the ink is dried, the original creators, the original writers, even the original executives all find them suddenly in violation of contracts for doing the job their way, not the Disney family way. And believe it or not, Disney is the most feminist. That's why I bring it up. Disney is the most feminist of feminism. See, Walt figured out a long time ago little boy stories were not profitable. His little boy stories weren't making money. Whenever he made a little girl story, mothers would drag their daughters in not once, not twice, but at least thrice on average. In fact, the viewing of Cinderella had an audience reparticipation rate of 6 times that of Pinocchio. So, more and more, Beauty and the Beasts were being produced. Mary Poppins. Oh, the little boy did not test well. There were many, many behind-the-scenes stories about how Disney transformed into the world's biggest girl brand. The Disney Princess brand is tremendously wealthy. What if I told you Harry Potter succeeded because of the girls going to see Hermione and rooting for Hermione, and the expected backlash? Lots of stories end up getting altered on the altar of propaganda. Feminism, state ownership, they are merged at the hip. Automation and suppression of the man, the working man. You are the tools, you are the means of production they wish to control. To keep women inside. They made sure that women had cheap jewelry, cheap makeup, cheap clothing, and plenty of bargain hunter-gathering activities. Gather-hunter activities. So in the hunter-gatherer society is led by man. The gatherer-hunter society is led by women, right? And that's what we have now. The transformation was complete. The 1970s saw the collapse of the independent dollar and had it tied to global markets. The government was sold a false bill of goods by a handful of economists, that mostly bankers, of course, and they all the political parties were duped. Remember, the Democrats used to be against central banking, then they weren't. Then they were because of state authoritarianism, aka the fascist dictator Roosevelt. Automotive sector was once the biggest employer of men, but of course, industrialization, reinvention of robotics, from the innovative toy to the super industrial powerhouse that can deliver much more productivity than any man is able, or even teams, with precision that does not require intelligence beyond that of the engineers who make it. So knowledge itself is being dribbled into the hands of the few. And as women take more and more college positions, they are taking all the elite jobs and thus played themselves out of the marriage market, because they can no longer find marriable men, because as they look up, the rich are getting older, the wealth has been transferred to women, and from women to super concentrated entities. And thus you have now the rise of the harem, where large, rich individuals have multiple women. Feminism has played itself. It is the middle management of the communist fascist state. The state will always have to favour feminists because it needs female mass consumerism to fund itself until it finds a way to eliminate all money, which is what China is trying to do right now. However, China is still trying to be a patriarchal state, and it's not happening because they don't know. They're still on their knee. They don't know what to do. They overvalued men, shifted society too far to the left, and then overvalued women in order to suppress the work, to suppress and carve up the capitalist. But of course, that greed and narcissism in China turned into a wildfire that even once timid girls are beyond recognition, because the survival instinct is now, right, to sell, and to sell big, and to sell as much. So now male entrepreneurs are pushed out of the market by men who are able to, by men who leverage women, aka the Kardashians, and others to sell product. And so if you can't sell product on, you go broke, and you are deemed a dead branch. Your genetic line must be useless. But it's not. It is the selfish narcissism of feminism that has written off millions of men as unworthy. And ultimately, they've written off their own genetic lines because, oh no, genetics is passed. See, they've sold this false bill of goods that genetics is really passed by mother to daughter through mitochondrial DNA. Yeah, well, see, this is the problem. Women believe fairy tales that appeal to their ego. Just like America was sold on the ego that become the petrodollar and you'll be the dominant force in the world. That all power is temporary, folks, because it depends on the dollar being traded. What happens when China and Russia decide to trade in the euro or their own currency, and India? Yeah, that's only 30% of the trade. But what happens is the US, drops the US trade by 30%. But then the US has to struggle. And other countries, the yuan, or whatever, or let's just call it the widget economy. The widget economy now encompasses 2/3 of the world. And that 2/3 of the world says, the majority will trade and trade and trade amongst ourselves until and we'll just watch the US collapse, because every year they'll go down and down and down. That's that's what revenge fantasy does. Green envy always turns into revenge fantasy. And you have to be an idiot not to believe that assholes who look at history and say, oh, we're oppressed, won't turn into people who want revenge. You have to be an absolute idiot to realise that free speech is being leveraged against America in order to spread hateful ideas against America. So the big box retail model turned into politics, turned into economics, and turned into ultimately the tool of failure for that economy. Because instead of having 360 million working Americans, you have invested in maybe 90 million working Americans and 120 million foreigners. And then on top of that, another 100 million foreigners around the world. But as those foreigners start working their own entrepreneurs and transferring of technologies and wealth over the next couple of generations, GE, Apple, they'll all become Indian companies. The wealth transfer, once the technology is no longer American, once there aren't any Americans able to make that technology, well, what do feminists care? They think we're fighting the patriarchy. And what do they care? They're asset owners. All they see is money come in. They don't care about the future. They think they could just go buy sperm, stick it between the legs, and that's all it'll take. But ultimately, their wealth invested in those companies those companies become higher and higher maintenance, higher and higher costs. Cost of living will soar. As we saw in England, the wealthy millionaire in England going broke. 3.5 millionaires went broke under Obama, and that doubled under Biden. This is the problem with allowing radical ideas to go against your functioning society because you always think there's a better idea. But there's no debate for better ideas. It's the most popular idea, not the best idea. And when ideas turn out to be wrong and California collapses, there's no backlash because people will cling to whatever they can grab and cling to their hatred. No wonder men are walking away because there's no saving women. There's no saving a feminist male. There's no saving a communist. You have to let them fail. But your governments and corporations sold you out because the communists said, we got cheap labour. And look how that worked out. You no longer have the skills to make even a watch. You have people who you have people who are the grandsons of electronic engineers who don't even know the fundamentals of electronics and are unlikely to get into university because of the nepotism system. I have no idea what happened to the universities. None whatsoever. Because our governments love, for some reason, big noses, but not mine. Guess there's something more than just the big nose involved, right? The nepotism club, ladies and gentlemen. Feminism is just their tool. So until we change the game and turn things around for ourselves, which we are doing, but we need more men to do it, for more men to walk away. Thank you for watching. Because remember, the asset class can't survive without mass consumerism. Feminism can't survive without pigs to slaughter. Thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe. Please support the channel. You can support me on Ko-Fi, Patreon, buy my books, and merch. All my links are in the link tree description below, in my profile, or scan the QR code on the screen. Appreciate each and every one of you. See you in the next video, and bye for now.